Okay, welcome back. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making it so that when we destroy our enemies, they look at a loot table and then based on the loot table decide what loot they're going to create for the player. Sometimes it'll be coins, sometimes it'll be hearts, sometimes it could be nothing, or it could be any other item that you create in your game. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I know there's a few issues right now with the way that we have our project set up with changing over to Cinemachine. Notably, the screen kick has kind of disappeared, but we will fix that very, very soon. So let's jump right in. Jumping right in here, so I'm looking at my overworld scene, and I haven't done anything since my last video, so I still have all of that camera behavior that is assigned to the room stuff, but in this example, I don't have the actual virtual camera set up with the room. So I'm going to fix that really, really quickly here. So with my room 1 game object, I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go to Cinemachine. I'm going to create a new 2D camera. This is going to be a child of room 1, and I will open prefab to restructure it to have that in it. Create 2D camera. There we go. And I'm going to call this room 1 vcam. Alright, so back to my scenes here. That extra virtual camera, I'll delete that. My room 1 vcam, this needs to have a Cinemachine confiner, and it's going to be confined to the room 1 bounding shape. And on my main camera, I need to make sure that my Cinemachine brain has my easing set relatively low. I think 0.5 is what I had it at last time. The vcam also needs to know what the target is, which is my player. Or follow, I guess, not target. So if I hit play, it should work just fine. I think my orthographic size is off. But that shouldn't matter. Let's see. Yeah, nope, it's not working like I want. Alright, so let's change this up here. So the orthographic size, I thought I had it, was like 6. That looks way better. And it is set to confine. And it is set to confine the screen edges. So let's try that now. If I hit play. Alright, cool. So that's confining like I wanted to. Now, it was brought up in the comments not too long ago that some people thought that this kind of, the fact that the camera is almost always moving could be disorienting for some people. So what you can do is, since this is a different camera setup than what I had in the dungeon, I can actually create some dead zones. So if I create a dead zone here, this area that isn't blue, this is an area in which the player can move around where the camera won't immediately start following. Now, this causes a problem because, as you can see, you can't really see very far ahead. So what you can do is you can create a look-ahead time variable and a look-ahead smoothing. So keep your eye on that little yellow dot that's on the player. So it's going to try to anticipate where the player is going to be and then move the camera around that dot instead of around the player themselves. So that's one thing that you can do to get that. There's a lot of stuff you can mess around here with. I'm not going to cover all of it because there's just so much. So I'm going to go out of here. I'm going to need to reconfigure my dead zone since I did that while it was in play mode. So I'll just make my dead zone say like that. And then for my room, I need to know what the virtual camera is. So there we go. Alright, so I'm going to save my scene. Now I've only done that for this one room. I haven't done it for all the other rooms, but that unassigned reference exception should go away when I hit play. Let's try this out. I'm going to do a video where I discuss some more bugs that have crept up and how we can fix those. That's going to come relatively soon. Alright, so what we want to do today though is we want to have a loot table so that when we destroy an enemy, we have a table where it decides randomly with some weight what item it's going to spawn when the enemy dies. It could spawn nothing. You could make it so that some enemies more likely to spawn hearts, some enemies or things like the pots maybe are more likely to spawn coins. But you can have it, be kind of inconsistent so that you even have some things that don't spawn anything at all. So that's what we're going to start with today. So let's go to our scripts here, and let's go into our scriptable objects, because we're going to start with a scriptable object. I'm going to right click, I'm going to create a new C# script, and I'm going to call this loot table. And then I'm going to open that up in Visual Studio, which is going to take a second, so I'll meet you back here in just a moment. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to inherit from scriptable object, and then add the create asset menu tag. I'm going to get rid of the start and update methods, and I'm going to make a custom class that's going to be a data holder that's going to hold information about the loot that we want. So I'm going to call this class public class loot. This doesn't need an argument, and loot is just going to hold two things. It's going to hold the thing that we want to loot, which the way that I've organized this project isn't an item, it's a power-up. So the hearts and the coins, I called those both power-ups because item refers to an item that's in the inventory. So I'm going to make a public power-up. So I just need to know what I want it to be, and I'm going to call it this loot. And then I want to have a chance of that loot being spawned. So public int loot chance. So like, for example, I could have it set up that I have one piece of loot that has a 25% chance, another piece that has a 10% chance, and maybe another piece that has a 50% chance, and then that would leave me with 15% nothing, which, you know, that's pretty good. You could even go super low. If you didn't want this to be an integer, you can make it a decimal. Like, for example, maybe you want a 0.5% chance of spawning something. You could change this from an integer to a float. So what I want to do here is I want to make an array of those loot objects. So this is going to be a public loot array, and I'm just going to call it loots, which sounds weird, but it makes sense to me. And that's all I need to do as far as the array goes. Now there's an issue here. I'm going to save this really quickly, and let's pop back into Unity. And I'll show you how to fix this, because I don't think we've actually talked about these custom classes yet. So I'm going to let Unity save everything and compile. I'm going to go to my scriptable objects when I can. I'm going to make a new folder for my scriptable objects. I'm going to make a new folder for my loot tables. So create folder, loot tables, and I'll open this up. I'll right click, I'll create a loot table, and I'm going to call this one mostly hearts. So this one is going to mostly spawn hearts, but maybe some other things. But you'll notice right now that even though I made that array public, it's not appearing. And the reason it's not appearing is because it's a custom class. So MonoBehavior doesn't know that it needs to serialize it until you tell it it needs to serialize. So to do that, here up above my class, I'm going to add the tag system.serializable. Now when I save and go back into Unity, after that compiles, I'll now be able to actually add stuff to that array. So it's going to compile for a second. I might have to click away from my mostly hearts loot table, but there we go. We've got our loots. I'm going to add just two things to it because I just have hearts and coins. So I'm going to open both of these up, element 0 and element 1. I'm going to go to my prefabs, and in my prefabs, my objects. So I'm going to have heart has a probability of 50%, and then coin is going to have a probability of 25%. And that adds up to 75, which means there's a 25% chance that nothing will drop. Now, to actually have this work the way we want it to, the way this is going to work is my enemy is going to have a loot table, and then when it dies, it's going to ask the loot table to tell it what it should spawn. And so the loot table will then pass it back an item to spawn. So to do this, we're going to make a new method here. This is going to be a public Powerup, and we'll call this loot Powerup. And this isn't going to take any arguments. We're going to add a default return statement for return null so that we can have it not return anything, so that sometimes enemies don't have anything spawn. So what I want to do is I'm going to create something called a cumulative probability. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what probability is, this is a super quick and dirty way of explaining it. So we're going to create a random number that is our item that we want to create. So from 0 to 100, we're going to create, if it ends up being 24, we're going to create the item with the 25% chip probability. But if it ends up being, say, 50, then it's going to be inside that 25 plus 50 is going to be inside the 75, but greater than 25, so it's going to spawn the second item, the one with the 50% probability, depending on how I order it. But if it picks a number that's like 90, well, 25 plus 50 is 75. 90 is greater than that, so that means it's going to be in the no item probability, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to create two different integers here. So the first integer, and again, you could use floats if you want to have a less than 1% chance of spawning things. So I'm going to create an integer that I'm going to call cumulative probability. I'm going to default that to 0. I'm going to create another integer that I'm going to call current probability that I'm going to set equal to random.range 0 to 100. So I'm dealing with 100%. You could change this so that you could have your probabilities be higher, which would mean that you wouldn't have to deal with float values for your probabilities. But I just think it makes more sense to go with up to 100% probability. So what we want to do here is we want to iterate over everything in the loots. So for int I is 0, I is less than loots.length I++. I'm going to add to my cumulative probability. So cumulative probability plus equals loots I, so the current loot chance, dot loot chance. And then I want to check to see, is my current probability less than or equal to my cumulative probability? So if current probability is less than or equal to cumulative probability, then I'm going to return the object that is part of that part of the loot. So return loots I dot this loot. And then we'll just continue the loop. So, like for example, the way that I have it set up right now, my heart has a 50% probability. So if it's going to go through, it's going to create a random number. Let's say that random number is 40. Cumulative probability is going to add 50 to it. So cumulative probability is 50. If current probability, 40, is less than or equal to 50, then we're going to return a heart. But let's say that current probability instead picks a number like 70. Well, when we do the 50, it's not going to be there. So it's going to iterate again through the loop, and it's going to say the cumulative probability, which was 50, is now going to be 75. And if my current probability is less than that 75, we're going to return that. And if it has to, like if it goes through that twice and it still doesn't return anything, then it's going to return nothing. So I'm going to save this, and now I want to look at my enemy script, which I don't think I have the base enemy script open yet. So I'm going to open that really quickly here. I'm going to pop back into Unity, go to my scripts. There we go. And my enemy scripts, as soon as everything's done compiling. My enemy scripts. Oh, that's my scriptable objects. There we go. And I want to open up the base enemy script, and every enemy is going to have a slot for a loot table, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have a loot table. And I'm going to include this with the death effects. So public loot table, and we'll call this this loot. All right, so now I need a method to find something from the loot table. So I'm going to create a new method here next to the death effect. This is going to be a private void, and we're going to say this is make loot. This isn't going to take any arguments. Instead, I'm going to check to see if there is a loot table. So if loot table is not equal to null. So if a loot table exists, then I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to say Powerup current equals loot table dot, what did I call it in my loot table? Loot Powerup. So back to my enemy script dot, oh, not loot table, it needs to be this loot dot loot Powerup, which means that I also have to change this from loot table to my loot, or this loot. Cool. So if a loot table exists, then we're going to create a variable, and we're going to fill that variable with whatever the loot table says should be in it. Now we're going to check to see if current is not equal to null. Then we're going to instantiate it. So we're going to instantiate current.gameObject at our transform.position, so at the enemy's position, with a quaternion of identity. So no rotation on it. I'm going to save that. And now I need to call this from when the enemy dies. So I already have my death effect here. I have my room signal that's being raised. So right after my death effect, I'm going to make loot. Alright, so I'm going to save that. And let's go back into Unity and let's see if I broke anything. So it's going to think for a second here. And then I'm going to have to go to my logs. I'm going to have to give them that mostly hearts loot table. So I'm going to choose, actually I'm going to choose all three of my logs here. And then in my scriptable objects, my loot table, under death effects, oh, maybe, oh, there we go, death effects. This is going to get the mostly hearts loot table. Alright, so let's hit play and let's try it out. So, it's going to think for a second here. Alright. Okay, cool. So this enemy just keeps dying. That's awesome. Is that the... Nope, that's not the weird one. Is it that it doesn't have... I wonder if it doesn't have a... Oh, it doesn't have a room signal. That's why. So what I want to do, so this room signal dot raise, it doesn't know what room signal to raise. I'm going to say if room signal is not equal to null, then we're going to raise it. So that's left over from the enemy doors that we did. So let me save that, go back into Unity here, and let's try this now. So that we can't just have an enemy that infinitely dies, but keeps coming. Alright, so let's try this out. And there we go. So we get a heart from that one. This one isn't giving me any damage. That's weird. Get a heart from this one. Why am I not taking any damage? That's weird. And get a heart from that one. Let me take a look at that whole damage thing, because I was trying it a second ago, and it was working like it was supposed to. So, give me a second. We're going to figure this out. Okay, so here's what the issue is, and I actually hadn't thought to check this. So the screen kick the way that we did it is we used the animator to do that, but since we're using the virtual camera to control the main camera, that animation that we made for the screen kick is no longer going to work. We can still make a screen kick, and it's still relatively easy. We're just going to have to redo the screen kick. So, but I'm taking damage here, and if I destroy my enemy, this one created a heart, which refilled my hearts. This one made a coin. And then, let's see, will this one make nothing? Maybe? Let's find out together. Well, this one makes a coin. So, it's random, but it's weighted by those probabilities. So, yeah, this was creating a loot table where... And you can actually extend this loot table to work with the pots as well, so that the pots would generate loot when you destroy them. So it would just be the exact same thing. You would have something similar when the pot is breaking. You'd have it check the loot table maybe make a loot table that's mostly coins for the pots, and then, yeah, go from there. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments down below. Otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter to find out when I post new videos. You can join my Discord, where there's a lot of really great people there, people who are way more knowledgeable than I am, to be honest. So Discord's the great place to go if you want to get answers to your questions quickly. So thank you very much. I hope everybody out there is enjoying their day and keeping warm if you're in the western half of the United States. And yeah, have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving a like, subscribing to the channel, or telling a friend who might be interested. Also, please consider following me on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can earn access to tangible rewards, like early access to videos, backer-only videos and series, polls for future topics, streams, and even individual tutoring sessions. You can find a link to that in the description. And as always, have yourselves a wonderful day.